Project management is essential to the success of any thought leadership campaign. Good writing doesn't just happen. You have to manage the process right and set up a situation where that writer can excel. Even if you have the world's greatest writer, if you don't provide them the information they need and manage the process and set expectations, there's a chance that the project could still go off the rails. And so it's really important to think about, from a project management perspective, what can you do to increase the chances of success? Nearly all of the marketing professionals I've worked with, whether they're CMOs or marketing managers, have very good intentions when it comes to managing the project and giving the writer what they need to be successful in a thought leadership project. But often there are misconceptions that they have in terms of what the writer really needs or how to set that person up for success. And so I wanted to identify some of those misconceptions, and then more importantly, give my perspective as a writer, being on the other side of the table, say, here's some ways to fix those things, and here's some things you can give the writer you're working with the tools they need to be successful. One of the biggest mistakes we see marketing professionals make is not providing the writers a creative brief. A creative brief is a 1 or 2 page document that outlines some of the essentials that are the roadmap of the project. It might include information like what's the timeline, what's the target audience, what subject matter experts are you going to be interviewing, what's the process going to be, what inputs will you have, things like that. And a creative brief is really important to provide to the writer because it gives the writer an idea of where the project is headed and ultimately what you're trying to accomplish. And it might seem like a pain to have to take the time to create this creative brief, but they're actually pretty simple. You can have a template built. They don't need to be really elaborate. But take the time on the front end to create those and then share it with the writer so the writer has visibility into what you're trying to accomplish with the project. Another reason it's good to give the writer the creative brief early on is that the writer can look at it and identify any missing links in the process and say, well, maybe we need more inputs in this area, or you've identified 2 subject matter experts. Here's a third person who I think their perspective could be really valuable. So again, getting that creative brief created and in the hands of the writer early on is really valuable. Another thing that marketing managers sometimes forget to provide writers that's valuable is branding information. And a lot of firms, especially larger ones and more sophisticated ones, have a brand book that has things about the brand positioning and the company's target audience and the value proposition and the differentiators. It might seem like those things are too high level to matter to a thought leadership project, but really, as a writer, I want to know those things so I can see how this project fits into the bigger picture of the brand positioning that the firm is trying to create. And again, as a marketing manager, those things are probably ingrained in your brain and you think it's obvious, but that could be an example of you being too close to the situation, and the writer isn't going to know those things. So share that brand book with the writer. Even if they spend a few minutes looking at it, it'll help the writer get an idea of here's what we're trying to accomplish and how we're trying to position the firm, and here's who we're trying to reach. So don't overlook the power of giving the writer the brand book early on in the process. In addition to the branding book, you also want to share your firm's style guide with the writer. The style guide is a document that lays out things like how your firm uses capitalization and punctuation and number usage and data usage and citations and those types of things that are important for making sure that all the writing across the firm feels consistent. And these things might seem pretty minor and you might think that you don't need to give that to the writer and you can just fix them during the editing process. However, getting the style guide in the hands of the writer early is definitely going to be helpful. It decreases the chances that those errors are going to be missed later on, and it'll save you time. So there's no reason not to give the style guide to the writer early on. Another mistake that marketing professionals often make with us is that they will give us guidance in the terms of high-level objectives. They'll say, we want the article to be pithy, we want it to be conversational, we want it to be authoritative, we want it to be compelling, or insert whatever adjective you want there. And while this high-level guidance is helpful, it's hard for us to guess at what they mean by pithy or conversational or authoritative. What's really helpful is for them to say, we want it to be pithy, and here's an example of a headline or a call-out quote or writing that we think captures that. And so we really encourage our clients to give us concrete examples. So when they give us the guidance, also give us, here's some examples of articles that we've written or other firms have written that either do a really good job of capturing on that goal, or conversely, ones that don't, because that's helpful for us to say, all right, we see how this one isn't pithy enough or this one isn't authoritative enough. That gives us a baseline to go off of, as opposed to trying to guess at what you mean by whatever adjective you've given us. Another big misconception that marketing managers have is that they think that if they give us too much information at the outset of the project, they're going to overwhelm us and overload us with information. And so as a result, they'll only send us 1 or 2 pieces of background reading for us to do to prep for the writing in the interviews. As a writer, I'd much rather have too much information than too little. So rather than just sending us 1 or 2 pieces that you think are going to be the most valuable, send us whatever you have on the topic, whether it's slide decks or emails or articles you've written, blog posts you've written, stuff your competitors have written on the topic. It's really easy for me to sort through that and figure out what's relevant and what's going to be handy when I come to interview people and when I go to start writing. So again, I'd much rather have too much information than too little. And again, you want to give me that information as early in the process as possible because it allows me to get my sea legs and sort through the things and understand what's relevant and what's going to be interesting here. And it's especially important to get me that information before I talk to or interview the subject matter experts because that allows me to come to those interviews to focus the questions on the things that are going to be the most relevant in shaping the article in a way that shows your distinct perspective as opposed to asking questions about general background information. I know that marketing managers have extremely difficult jobs. There's a lot of internal and external stakeholders that they need to keep happy. Hopefully these tips and identifying these misconceptions will make the process of working with writers go even smoother and easier so that it'll free up more of the marketing manager's time to focus on those stakeholders that do need to keep happy.